Hello, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you once again on this here Shabbat. Hope all you folks have had a blessed week and that everything's well with you. Appreciate all the people who watched the video. I hope that it has done what my objective is, which is to get you to question things. And this week is kind of a follow-up on that. But I had a comment from one of the people that watched, and I kind of want to try to address that a little bit. And what it was is, well, if we are in this little season, then what are we to do? Well, the righteousness of Elohim never changes, and what He expects out of us never changes. And what I would encourage you to do, which is what I've, told people from the beginning, read the Torah, read all Scripture, but read the Torah, and of course the Levitical system and all that stuff's all gone, but the basics of what He's telling us about how to live, how to eat properly for good health, keeping His feast, His feast. They're not the feast of the Jews or the Hebrews or anybody else. They're His feast. Keeping His Sabbath, keeping His commandments. And, anybody that says that, we don't have to keep His commandments, they're deceiving you. They're lying to you. Because I read it last week. Christ's own words here in John chapter 14, verse 15, if ye love me, keep my commandments. Now, the way that we fulfill that is the law of love. And that's where the first epistle of John is very important, I believe. If you read that, then he'll explain to you what it means to love your neighbor as yourself, to love Elohim with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Because if you do those things, then the law, the Ten Commandments are fulfilled in that. Because you're not going to do things to hurt people. And you're not going to do anything to hurt Him. You're going to walk in His ways. And it doesn't matter whether we're going into the tribulation. It doesn't matter if we were, in the days of the Levitical system. It doesn't matter. Or if we're in the little season or whatever. All that stuff still applies. That is His eternal way. Everlasting way. It's never going to change. So if we follow, and of course in the first epistle of John, he says, who is that one that is of Elohim? The one who, that confesses Yahushua HaMashiach. And that He came down here, He lived, He died, and was resurrected. I mean, the gospel. But, and so I just wanted to kind of address that, that we still do the same thing. There's no change in His eternal way. The ways of Elohim. There is no change in that. And, His commandments and the law of love that Christ talked about. Because He says if you love if you love Yahweh Elohim with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and you love your neighbor as yourself, this is all of the law and the prophets. That's what they are. And of course, in the Torah and in the prophets, you'll read that same thing. The New Testament is in the Old Testament concealed, and the Old Testament is in the New Testament revealed. And it's really not a testament. A testament is something, that somebody does, for something to do with their death. No, it's the first covenant and the renewed covenant. So, that's all it really is. The New Testament, the renewed covenant is it renewed that original covenant. The only thing, because the Hebrew people had broken it. They had broken that covenant. And he renewed it without because Yahushua became the final sacrifice for the whole world. And so the sacrifice of animals was no longer required, no longer necessary. So that particular, the Levitical system was done away with, and now we're under the order of Melchizedek. Totally different kind of system. And you can read about that in the book of Hebrews. All right, so today, what I kind of want to do, I want to title this, "Put Yourself in Satan's Position." What would you do? What would you do if, you created a beast system, and you came up against Yahushua, and you were defeated, and you were grabbed up, and you cast into a prison for 1,000 years? I mean, what would you do if you were bound for 1,000 years? I mean, would you just kick back and relax and bide your time until you were released again? And you got to remember that Hasatan is a ancient being, with superior intelligence and knowledge and great wisdom. And he is the consummate deceiver. He's the deceiver of deceivers, the liar of liars. So, when it comes to planning out how to deceive, nobody's going to, there's no matching him. So, and I don't think he's just isolated down there by himself. I think all of his cohorts are down there with him. All of his followers, the host of heaven that rebelled with him, that fell with him. I think they were all there with him, and because if it, in order for people to be in this millennial kingdom, to be able to live in peace and without wars and just being tempted and all that kind of stuff, you would have to get bind them all, but you got to bind the chief of them, and then the rest of them too, and then or either put a kibosh on them or something. So you've been cast down here, and you've got 1,000 years to plan out your deception. Now, I wrote down on some things, the hypothesis. I would make plans for my eventual release, is what I'd do. I would be making plans for when I was released. And the questions I would ask to my cohorts that are in prison with me, I'd ask them these questions, okay, how would you approach this? What would you do in this situation? And then I would formulate my plan off of that. First, question one is we're going to have to hide or cover up the past. we're going to have to figure out a way to hide this millennial kingdom and explain away all of these incredible structures, the electrification, wireless electrification of the world, all of these kind of things. We're going to have to try to figure out a way to get rid of that. Okay. Question 2. Find human accomplices to help me pull off the deception. I have got to deceive them first. So, okay, you've had now, and this is I was talking to a lady friend of mine that, we discussed the Bible and stuff, and I was telling her, she says, well, I thought that in the millennial kingdom it was supposed to be all saints and stuff. I said, no, that's not what it says. It says that the saints will rule and reign with Christ. I mean, if you look at the parable of the talents, where he gave talents to his servants, and he says, I'm going away to acquire a kingdom. And I want you to, do right while I'm gone. And, and of course they, a couple of them multiplied their talent. And he says, you've been a faithful and just servant. I'm going to make you ruler over 10 cities. And so during that millennial kingdom, the saints, the true believers, the followers of Yahushua, they're going to be put over cities and nations, and he's going to rule from Zion. Okay, and so, and he's the world ruler. All right, now during this time, okay, in the tribulation, all these armies come up against him, and he destroys them. But he doesn't destroy everybody in the world. No, he says if the days wasn't shortened, that all flesh would not, that all flesh would be destroyed. So he, shortened the days, had this, the desolation of Jerusalem, and the destruction of the temple, and he destroyed all of those armies. Okay, so, but all the peoples that those armies come from, they still living. And they're still just regular human beings. So they go into this millennial kingdom where there's no more wars. There's peace and prosperity. Everybody has enough to eat. Everybody has somewhere to live. Everybody has clothing. Good health. And think about this. I've listened to a lot of these modern philosophers and the intelligentsia, and this is one of their big arguments, about socialism or, cultural Marxism and stuff like that, is that the reason you have wars and conflicts and stuff, and the adversity that we see in the world is because of the disparities. If everybody was equal, everybody had the same amount of food, everybody had a place to live, everybody had clothing, their necessities, their needs met, then you would probably see an end to conflict. Well, I don't believe that. I do not believe that, because the nature of man is still the same. And I think this is what the millennial kingdom is supposed to represent. Is, okay, I'm taking out all spiritual external forces that have been influencing humankind and been tempting and stirring trouble up and all that. Well, I'm taking them out of the way. And I'm gonna, you're gonna have a world in which you're free to exercise your artistic capabilities, your engineering, your architectural. I mean, you can just flourish. And I'm gonna make sure that there's no conflicts, no war. I'm gonna rule with the rod of iron. And my saints, or the disciples and the believers that were martyred during the tribulation period and all that stuff. Those people are going to be ruling over these territories and over nations and over cities and stuff. And their purpose there is, one is to teach people the ways of Elohim. But the other is to settle disputes. Because you're going to have somebody over here who goes, well, I don't want a canal built through my property, over here where I'm farming at. I don't want that great big huge building built here, And the other ones, well, we need to put it here, because, whatever. And so a dispute arises. And that's why he says, why Paul talks about, don't you know that you will judge angels? So, you should be able to judge in the smallest matters. And so they're judging over these people. They're acting as judges or mediators between them to settle disputes, to keep the peace. You see? So you can see that even without a tempter or anything, people are still going, they still have their human nature, their fallen Adamic nature. And so you go through here. Well, now, all through, you got Romans in there, you got the Germanic peoples, Assyrians, you got probably some Hebrew people still alive, that are going through there. But I think, in the destruction of Jerusalem and all, I think most of them got destroyed. But there may have been some, that managed to escape or whatever. The ones that were saints or whatever, because I think they were, like the disciples, the ones that were still alive at that point. Because some of them was. John was one. But, so this is all hypothetical, folks. I mean, because as I go along, I'll ask the questions about that kind of stuff. But, okay, so, so people still have their nature, but their lives have been extended, because it talks about how people, you will be 100 years old and still be considered a child in that period of time. Okay, so these peoples, they bide their time, they go along, and all that, but all along, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, I should be ruling, not this disciple of Yahushua that's ruling over this city over here. I should be ruling. I'm smarter than them, especially like the Romans or whatever, them people, because think about this, folks. I mean, and I want to kind of preface all this with this, because you have to. One of the things you got to try and, if you're Satan, one of the things you got to do is you got to convince people that, hey, man, you're the pinnacle of technological advancement and all that. Those people back then, they were primitive. They were, Stone Age, to kind of distract you away from, to program it into your mind that you can't, this couldn't be done. There's just no way that it can only be done this way. In other words, if you want to build a big structure, a big building, you got to have a crane. You got to have a tower crane or something. But you look back at, places like today, look at Rome over there, the Parthenon, it's got that, and as far as I'm aware of, I think it's still the largest unsupported concrete dome in the world. So you're going to tell me, and I mean, it's thousands of years old, possibly, that those people were inferior, bumpkins or whatever, and yet we can't do that now. And we don't, people say that they figured out the Roman concrete, but I'm still skeptical. I'd have to see it. And this is the thing too. If you're programmed to believe that, this is the only way this could be done, then you're never going to look for any other kind of alternative. Now, there is occasionally you have a person that pops up, on the scene like Tesla and other people that say, well, you know what? I figured it, like Pantone and the Geet reactor, running engines on water. I mean, it can't be done, but it was being done, and and there is a law on the books in the United States that says that the government has the right to suppress technology that would be disruptive to the economy. Well, I'd say a water ran engine that runs off of water would be disruptive to the petroleum industry now, wouldn't it? And I mean, there's probably been like 30 or 40 people in the last 50 years, 60 years that just mysteriously died or whatever, that come up with some kind of technology that they had to get rid of. They had to suppress it because, so, and I mean, this, I think we've had a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times in history where the level of technological development reached a real high point. The first one was before the flood. And of course, they were being taught by the watchers, the fallen ones, I mean, if you read in the first book of Enoch, you will see that they were teaching them all kinds of stuff. And ultimately taught them how to make genetic stuff. And that's why I began to think about it. I tell you the end from the beginning. The end's going to be like the beginning was. They're, up to the destruction of Noah. I mean, the end is going to be the same thing. It's going to culminate in a destruction, worldwide destruction, not just localized or whatever. Okay, so and if he tells you the end from the beginning, and people say, oh, the tribulation and the millennium and all that, that's the last days. Well, no, it ain't. The last days would be the time of the little season. That would be the last days. I mean, because if you have a tribulation that you don't know exactly when it's going to start, and then you got another 1,000 years after that, well, that ain't exactly the last days, is it? No, the last days would be that little season. And if he tells you the end from the beginning, and you begin to see all the things we're seeing, the genetic manipulation of stuff, them creating chimeras in the lab, and the transhumanism movement, and creating cyborgs and all that kind of stuff, well, that kind of falls right back to the beginning there, the time between Jared and Noah. So they reached a real high level of development back then. And, and you have these historians and archaeologists that will say, like the Great Pyramid over there, Cheops or whatever in Egypt, and because this is what they always do. Like you say, well, how could these people that were using tools that were softer than the material they were working with, how does that work? How do you use copper tools to cut granite and to drill holes through granite? You can't. And so, the argument that they were using, these primitive tools to do this kind of stuff is, and then the other argument is always is, well, they just had lots of people, All right. But in that Great Pyramid, up at the, near the very top up there, and I mean, that pyramid I think is like 555 feet without the capstone. So it's 555 feet up to that point where the capstone's missing. And down, probably like 20 feet down or something from the top, 30 feet, there's a chamber in there that has a 100-ton stone in it. Now, I don't know how what you know about stone, size of stones, and these kind of weights. You're talking 200,000 pounds for a 100-ton stone. Not easy to move. I mean, in fact, we don't, we're capable of moving a 100-ton stone, but we don't. They generally work with stones that are 20 to 30 tons, and then they cut them and stuff like that. But because they're so difficult to work with. Okay, so you're going to tell me, well, they just, they had 20,000 people moving that big 100-ton stone. No, I mean, it's not just a matter of moving it. It's a matter of setting it into place in a very small space. A space that basically the stone is taking up the space. So how are you going to get 20,000 people in there to lift this big stone and set it into place? Well, they come start, hee-hawing and all that. So here again comes in, alternative technology. Using sound. I mean, I've seen experiments done here recently, where they were levitating objects using sound, but not just that, but anti-gravity, which is not gravity at all. It is magnetism. It's electromagnetism. You can, unlike polarities attract each other. In other words, a positive and a negative, boom, they attract to each other. A positive and a positive, you take two magnets and take the positive poles and push them towards each other, and they want to kind of repel each other. Well, everything has a charge, folks. I don't care what it is. Everything carries a type of charge. Now, it can be kind of neutral, but if it's energized, it will develop a polarity. A positive charge on one side and a negative charge on the other, like a battery. And so if you created a charge on something and then you had another substance or another device, like a platform that you created a charge on and that would repel it, you could lift up a big heavy stone like that and move it. It's an which goes to show you don't have to have a crane. Now, not, because we're not actually doing it doesn't mean it can't be done. And if you were digging through these sites and you discovered something in there, but you don't know it's a device of some kind. It just looks like some kind of stone or just an odd looking kind of relic, because you've been told all your life and in all your, studies in university or whatever, you've been told that this is the way this is done. You can't do it any other way. The physics, they've convinced you that this is the only way that it can be done. So if you found some kind of device, you wouldn't know what you were looking at. You wouldn't have a clue. You would just say it's some kind of, artistic relic, that somebody just their imagination, they designed this thing, this structure or this, excuse me, folks. You just designed this, out of your head just as an artistic expression or something. And they found over there, and okay, so now we're talking, that's the antediluvian, pre-flood world that reached a high level of technological development. And they done, and they had a lot longer period of time. Think about it. According to our mainstream timeline, we've become a nation in 1776, and they're going around horses and buggies, and now look where we're at. In 250 years, folks. Rockets, nuclear power plants, computers, cars, trains, you name it. AI. All this stuff in just that little short period of time. And then think about this, you got to quit, believing their narrative. Like I said, question everything. That we are the pinnacle of man's intellectual achievement and development. As if those people back then didn't have intelligence equal to our own, and and like I say, pre-flood, probably greater, because they were living in a pristine environment. They had perfect, pure food, clean, pure air. I mean, they had the original, the original system that was created, to be optimal for man. So they were in optimal conditions, which would make their, brains function on a whole higher level than our own. And so, we got to get out of that mindset of thinking that we are the pinnacle of creation, and intellect. I kind of think we've digressed. And so, okay, and then you go to the flood. After the flood, Noah and his family come down and reestablish things, and they begin to multiply on the earth again. And then you come about 200 years out to Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. And Yahweh Elohim came down and looked at what they were doing down there, and he says, they are of one language and of one purpose, and there's nothing that will be restrained from them which they imagine to do. So I think they were building a device of some type. I mean, it was big. It was a big structure and all, but, it wasn't a tower to try to reach all the way up to the firmament. Otherwise you'd have built it on the highest mountain you could find and cut out a lot of the building, but no, they were trying to access a portal or an opening in the firmament up there where they could, open it up or something. So it was a device of some kind. And I believe it was located in the same general areas where Jacob had his vision of these Malahim going up and down, a stairway or whatever. I mean, they that's where they were going in and out at. And of course, Nimrod, after the flood and all that, again, Hasatan and his minions, they probably, came to him, and they're not going to come to you like some dragon or something, or with horns and all that. I mean, they're going to come to you like some old man, ancient man or something, that, with wisdom and knowledge and, and craftiness. He's going to be crafty, So he comes to somebody like Nimrod, that's already got a bad side to him, and says, look, I'll give, I'll put you in, you'll be the ruler of the world. Just bow down to me. Follow me. And I'll give you all kinds of knowledge, and we can work together to, you think about, he destroyed the world and your ancestors. So, wouldn't you like to get back at him? And so he gets, he's creating this civilization with a high level of technology. But, oh no, they were Stone Age, and, no. They had a level of, high level of technology. I mean, because again, they're thinking and, and all that stuff is no different than ours is. I mean, it's like I've said before, if you believe you can do it, you can do it. If you believe you can do something, you can do it. Because the Aether, tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's there, how to do it. It's all there. Nothing new under the sun. So, but, he confounds their language and spreads them out, moves them all over the world, because he wanted them to go and, repopulate the earth. And they just wanted to gather up there in one spot, and he wanted them to go and repopulate the earth. So they physically take these people and put them where they want them at. Then, now, from that period to the time of the Romans, that's a pretty long period of time. Of course, because people are scattered out everywhere, they're, and their language has been confounded. I mean, they're just small groups of people now. It takes them time to build up the population to where they're, an empire or a civilization. And so the first one, the one that kind of, and during the time of the Hebrews there in the Levant, we don't know what level of technology they were. I know that, whenever the Queen of Sheba, whenever says that, that she wasn't told the half of it, that it was just a magnificent city. And that temple and all was just unbelievable. I mean, when you look at the list of stuff that David purchased for the building of the temple, and then all the stuff that Solomon purchased, I mean, it was unbelievable. And I mean, it was like 20 years in the building. I mean, that's an incredible structure. And all the gilding work and all the needlework and all this fancy stuff. Precise. Well, I'm saying, they probably had to develop some kind of technology too. And maybe even, learn to manipulate the tree of knowledge of good and evil to actually manifest stuff. I don't know. But, so then, go forward, another 1,000 years to the Roman Empire, they're developing, technology and stuff too. I mean, you think about all them structures that are still standing. At least 1,500, 2,000 years. I mean, because we don't really know the timeline. I mean, it's just so messed up. But, so you have another civilization here that's developed a technological prowess, and they found these cylinders. They said it was probably some kind of crude cannon or something like that, but you would have had to have a crane to put a cannonball in one of these things. They were that big. And so they were some kind of energy weapon or whatever. And I talked about the fascia that's on the back of a dime, and the depictions of these ancient gods carrying these things. There's some kind of weapon. So, and not to mention the fact, folks, look at that whole area over there in the Middle East. It's a desert. And there's vitrified glass all over the place over there. And the only way that you can make vitrified glass is to set off a nuclear blast. And they've dug up the old, the churches that are mentioned that Yahushua is addressing directly. The scriptures for us is written for us. But there's certain places in there where he was directly addressing people. Like in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, and in Revelation chapter 1, 2, and 3. He's directly talking to people. And those churches over there, they excavated them, and the stone in them was melted. I mean, you're talking something that, a level of technology that is beyond what we've been told that they had. And vitrified glass, the only place they've ever found vitrified glass is where they done nuclear weapons testing. Afterwards, they found the vitrified glass, and it's a transition that happens with silica or sand, and it goes beyond just normal glass. It's not like the kind of glass like we make for window panes and that kind of, bottles and stuff. No, it's a level beyond that. And so, and they found it all over in that area over there. So that area, and they try to tell you, that, oh yeah, that desertification over there, that happened over 5,000 years, and, because of, overpopulation and weather, climate change and that kind of stuff. What if that was the result of this war? The one where it says no flesh should be spared. And so, there's another place of technology. And then you don't have another one until, the Industrial Revolution in England and here. And then you look at, and then you begin to look at these structures that we see, like the U.S. Capitol in Washington, these capitals all over the country, all built exactly in a similar fashion. And and I've told you about the White City up there in Chicago, Chilaga, and all over. I mean, these structures are everywhere. These old world structures, they're all over the place. So. And of course, we don't, the first power tool made was a drill by Bosch. I think it was Bosch that made the first power tool in 1895. And when you look at the photographs of the World's Fair or exhibition there in Chicago, the Columbia exhibition, they said they built 200 buildings, all the infrastructure, all the lakes, all the canals, all that stuff, with 10,000 people in 2 years. And when you see these pictures of these people about this big standing next to a column that's 20 feet, 30 feet in diameter and 200 feet tall, with big capitals on the top of them, you're going to tell me that you built these in 2 years? It's like I talked about last week about carving one of these intricate statues. And they were all over the place. You mean to tell me you got that many craftsmen that on that level of craftsmanship, without cranes, without excavators, without modern power tools, building 200 buildings, plus this great big huge lake with all these canals and electrification and moving sidewalks and all that stuff? So, so during that, Tartaria. See, and that's the alternate, because again, one of the things I said here is you're going to have to create alternative scenarios. You can't just have just one. You got to have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. You create your initial plan and narrative, but if people will start waking up and figuring it out, then you got to have a plan B. Okay, so we've established that technology, I believe, has been there's been like this, where technology gets developed again, and then something comes along and shuts it down or whatever, and then it comes back again, and then it gets shut down. All right. Now the other thing, if you were in Satan's shoes, in his position, eliminate anyone who will not go along with the new history narrative. In other words, if you got people that come out of that millennial kingdom and they're disputing what you're saying, they're saying, oh, no, I lived in that. I know who built those structures. Those were people that were descended from the Romans and the Germanic Assyrian people. They worked together. They were the best, at building and engineering and all that kind of stuff. So, they were the ones that were the big builders and all. Oh, no, no, that's not the story, man. That's not what we're telling. So what did they do? They took a lot of these buildings that were massive, massive buildings that were architecturally pretty unique, with minarets and spires and these antennas and stuff all over them. You mean to tell me you're going to build an insane asylum like that? I mean, you would think you just build like a concentration camp kind of thing, and with just utilitarian buildings and shove them in there. So they labeled these people as religious zealots that were having delusions. Hundreds of thousands of them. And they put them in these insane asylums. And they probably killed a bunch of them too, but I mean, these people, the controllers, the ones that agreed to join league with Hasatan when he was released, what are they going to do? They don't want to get their hands dirty, They're not the ones that do the killing and all that stuff. No, they get other people to do it. That's beneath me. I don't want to get my fingers dirty. No, but they get these other people that are willing to do it. Or to grab them people up and shove them in an insane asylum over here and then take their children and haul them off to these, again, great big, huge, elaborately built, buildings that are built with such precision. I mean, it's just not funny. And the thing is that I think that whenever he was released, that Yahuwah shook the entire earth. Sort of like, it's a signal that the end of the millennium has come and the release of Hasatan is here. And it was such a shaking that it caused liquefaction, pretty much, not no mud floods. It caused liquefaction. And you can go look it up. I mean, this is a geological term that's used to describe conditions that sometimes develop in earthquakes, where the land, the earth basically becomes like a liquid. It's where water gets mixed in with the soil and it gets shaken and it becomes just like water almost, or, liquid, and structures will sink right down into it. And you can see a lot of these pictures, from around the world, of these people digging out these big cities. Digging it out. It's just, Okay, so you got to get rid of the people that can spill the beans, that can come out and say, hey, this is the way it really was. I lived in it. I know what was going on. Well, you got to get rid of them people. And of course, when other people start seeing that you're doing this to them, they start shutting up. And they are able to be bought off or whatever. Like, okay, if you go along, we'll give you 5,000 acres of land out here, in Missouri or in Kansas or somewhere out here. And, cows and, and then we'll take and send these orphans out to you. And this is the thing, these orphan trains are running all over the place out there. Where did all that rail come from? Where did all them railroad tracks come from? And there's video, or not videos, but pictures showing them digging these rails up 20 feet, 25 feet down. And then they begin to dismantle them. I've seen a bunch of dismantling of railroads even now. They're still doing it. Why? Of course, we're so far removed from it now that, it's kind of a moot point. But back then, they were digging up these rails. And in all these cities, they had all these trolleys and stuff, electrified trolleys. But then they, the batteries died on them or whatever, and they, or the system that kept it charged up, broke down or whatever, and they didn't know how to repair it. So they started drawing them with animals, pulling them with horses and stuff. But all that track was everywhere. It was in all the cities, everywhere. Where did it come from and when? I mean, you don't never see anything, about them building these or nothing. It's just like the U.S. Capitol. They got, these drawings of this rickety scaffolding. I mean, it's wood, rickety scaffolding up around the dome there, and the dome itself ain't up there. It's like the thing that they're building to go up that the dome's going to sit on. And it's all these columns, there's a row of columns around in a circular pattern around, and then a platform, and then another thing of these columns. And then on top is the cap, the dome set on top of it. And this is supposed to have been going on back in like the mid-1800s, before they had cranes. How did they get it up there? And I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to the Capitol there in Washington, but that thing's huge, man. I mean, that building is huge. It's a labyrinth. And the floors inside, I mean, they are just exquisite inlays. I mean, and the same as I was talking about last week about the Thomas Jefferson, Memorial Museum there at the library, or the Memorial Library at the Library of Congress there. I mean, you got to look at these buildings, man. I mean, and you're going to tell me in 1880 through 1888 you built this here? And it was such a precision that it could only be accomplished using some kind of machines or some kind of molding process. I mean, because it couldn't be done by hand. I can tell you that right now. I've seen craftsmanship. I mean, people that done, stuff that's expensive to do. Like in fancy houses and stuff. And it was not flawless. I mean, you can look at it and see little things here and there, I mean, but it gave it just people admire, hand-done craftsmanship and stuff. It's like the woodworking and stuff. And so, but these structures are built with such a precision, and I mean, that it's just unbelievable. And so so if you got these structures like this all over the place, I mean everywhere, you got to begin the process of destroying, altering, or repurposing the existing millennial structures. And creating a narrative around them, like the big fires and stuff, where, you burn out everything, all the rickety stuff that we actually built, and say that you rebuilt you rebuilt these buildings there, these real, and it's usually like in 2 years that they're telling you that they've done this stuff, and there's no way that you, even today with the tools and the equipment and all that we got, that you could build one of these structures in 2 years. You could not do it. I don't think you could build the Capitol up there in 20 years. Or that library there, or the Field Museum up there in Chicago, the Museum of Industry and Science and all that stuff. You couldn't do it. And when you look back at these pictures of Penn Station that they tore down, and this place was magnificent, and they tore it down. Why? Because people were probably beginning to say, man, come on, man, you saying you built this in 2 years? What? And again, it's one of these structures where you got these little people standing there on the sidewalk by these columns, that are 15, 20 feet in diameter, and 100 feet, 150 feet tall. And then the other thing about these big structures, all of them, the doors are huge. I mean, You know, except where they've tuck and went in and modified it and put just regular man-sized, modern human-sized doors in them. But you look at these big cathedrals over there in Europe and stuff, and here in the United States, like up in, excuse me, folks, cat hair or something. But up there in Indianapolis, the Scottish Rites Cathedral. That's kind of a contradiction in terms there, but the doors on that thing's like 20 feet tall. I mean, okay, so where are these 20-foot people? 18, during the millennial kingdom, I mean, if you read about it where it talks about the travelers, and you look up that term about the travelers and all that stuff, they were Nephilim, they were giants. I mean, and they're still on the earth today, I mean, but they're just hidden, they hiding out and stuff, but there's plenty of Nephilim around, I mean, and they'll be revealed, whenever they go up against the holy city and the saints. I mean, that's what's going to happen. All the Hassatan's forces are going to be gathered together. That's where it, in Revelation 20, beginning at verse 7, it talks about he gathers, Gog and Magog from the four corners of the earth. Well, Gog is, I think if you look it up, Gog was some kind of a principality, one of these principalities. Excuse me, folks. So, and in that, again, that Penn Station, they said they built it in 2 years and it took them 4 years to tear it down. Yeah, okay. The other thing is this number 5 question, or what you would ask your cohorts, we would begin to create a control apparatus. Banking, military, government, religion, education, and secret societies. And as a control system. To control the masses and to indoctrinate the masses into the narrative that you want them to believe. And that guy, I think I mentioned him last week, his name was Gunnar Heinsohn, S-O-N-E. He was a German economist, but he was also a chronologist, and I think he was multidisciplinary. And he said, that 700 years has been added to the timeline. That at least, maybe more, but he just said, on the surface is about 700 to 800 years that had been added from the 1st century to the 9th century. And he said that, structures in the 9th century matched up to the structure, and were built the same as the ones in the 1st century, and all the other structures in between, the 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, on back, all of them were built the same on the same plane, on the same archaeological plane. Because when you dig down beneath some of these structures and stuff, or around them, down below them, there's nothing there. There's no other buildings, no other structures there. And through that long a period of time, it should be. If you just built this structure in the 9th century, then they should have been existing structures and, bricks, pieces of stone or whatever down below it, and there's not. And so, that's but you can look into that guy if you want, Gunnar Heinsohn. All right. So, they've created this control apparatus, starting with like the banking. Because that's the number one control mechanism, is money. To control and to buy people. Okay, so, you got to have money and a banking system. So, you got your Ashkenazis over here that are, shrewd banking minds, the Rothschilds. The ones that, and this is ironic too, is because I've done some, digging in on some of these people and stuff, and in 1700s along in there is about where that's where they end at. You can't really find anything about them before that. So it's almost as if that area, 1776, right in that general area, is when this happened. This reset. And I mean, because that tends to seem like all these events and all happened around that same time. The founding of the Illuminati, the founding of the the Declaration of Independence, and soon after, the French Civil War, the French Revolution, and other stuff, just all around the world. You begin to look around, in the historical record, and you'll see that this timeline there in the 1700s, that all this stuff is when it just kind of went off. And then you would have to get rid of the, people like the Native Americans, to try to eliminate them from telling, because they were storytellers, so they were telling a different kind of history about things, and so you had to shut them up. Or say, oh, well, they're just telling a bunch of myths, it ain't true, we know what the real history is, that kind of stuff. So you had to cover that, and probably in other places in the world too, people had to be shut up. All right. Number 6, create different alternative histories, add time, change calendars, alter dates on structures, that kind of stuff. To do with time, timelines, histories. You would create multiple ones, because if, you're plan A, you're plan B, you're plan C, okay, if this original one that we created, that seemed the most plausible, if some reason or other people begin to start waking up and start questioning it, then we can say, oh, well, it was the Tartarians, so you create the Tartarians, you create these maps, and stuff, and place them around, in different places, and it's got Tartaria on it. And it's in these early dictionaries and encyclopedias and stuff, and then you take them out. But yet them existing ones are still around. You don't go and get rid of them. You would think, well, if we're trying to hide it. So in previous iterations, like of the Webster's Dictionary, you go, the 1828, it's got Tartaria and the Tartans and all that stuff in it. But then you go down to the 1855 edition, and it ain't in there no more. All right. But yet this 1828 edition is still in libraries around the world, and even individuals have got copies of it and all that kind of stuff. But preceding generations from them, they don't really, you may have an egghead scholar, that goes and searches out these things or whatever. But so he said, oh, wait, man, I've never heard of this in college. They didn't teach us about no Tartaria and the Tartars and all that stuff. Well, now it's starting to come out. So again, if the destruction of the timeline and, all that stuff starts, people start questioning it, like Gunner and others start questioning it and putting it together and saying, well, that ain't matching up. The Dark Ages and all that stuff. Well, it was the Tartars, Tartaria. Well, why would you try to hide that? If that's all it was. Why would you try to, why are you trying to hide this history? These structures. All this stuff, why didn't you just say, oh, well, it was this Tartarian Empire? let it go at that. You know, that would have still been an alternative to the millennial kingdom. You know, and it's funny how they call that period that there's no history, the Dark Ages. That, that's exactly something like Hasatan would do, call a time of light dark. But that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to alter time, add time. You'd have to go around the buildings and structures and change dates on them. Change the calendars, maps. I mean, you'd have all this stuff you'd have to do. All right, and then what else would I do? Number 7. I would create heliocentric cosmology, evolution, and alien creators. Because in order to have the alien creators, you got to have heliocentric cosmology and evolution. Because in the evolution, the narratives that you see, like in the Anunnaki stuff, oh yeah, well we came from a planet called Nibiru, and every so often we swing around into an alignment to where we can come from there to here, and we came over here looking for gold, and we saw these apes, ape-like creatures here, and that had evolved here, and so we took them and mixed our DNA with them and done it over generations until we created you. And so, here you are. And here we are. We're coming back to give you an upgrade. We're going to take you up to your next level. We call it transhumanism. And this is funny. I saw this, and you see, your YouTube streams, and suggested videos and that kind of stuff that come up on your channel, on your page or whatever. There was one I seen on there, and it was it said galactic elders say we created humans to be weapons. And that's kind of ironic, because that's exactly what they're wanting to do, is turn human beings into weapons, cyborgs. But the part of the creation of the narrative that they've created is that, oh, we're coming into the tribulation, man, the mark of the beast, and then the millennial kingdom, But instead, so they got to keep people believing that ain't happened yet. You see, I mean, you got to make it so that people don't believe that that's ever happened, that it's this yet to happen, so that you don't really see. Yeah, I mean, things look similar and kind of make sense, and all that. But then when you listen to what people are saying, like Yuval Noah Harari and Elon Musk and, Michio Kaku and these humanists, they're wanting to turn us into a cyborg that can be controlled and connected to the cloud, the IBM cloud, the Apple cloud, this computing cloud, which is just a computing environment, storage environment, and use us as weapons. They come out and they tell you what they really intend on doing, and what their objective is to make us into a weapon, to go up against the whole, the Kodesh city and the saints. And So, you would have to create all of these different things. I mean, this would during that period of time when you're bound down here, this is the kind of stuff that you got to be thinking about. How am I going to get from point A to point B without them figuring out what's going on? I mean, and I'd say that during this period of time, there's always been one that Elohim will kind of reveal things to them, and they see things for the way they really are and not the way that they've been presented. And of course, they're called crackpots and loons, and so they get relegated to the dustbin of history. But if you go back and you start reading some of their writings and stuff, they're telling you a lot of this stuff, that the narrative and the story that we're being given is not really matching up with what I'm seeing, And of course, for different people, they're awakening, their eyes starting to open up and seeing things that we were programmed not to see or not to, accept. Like I said about me, like in the late 90s, about the Sabbath, and the pagan holidays and other things. And then the flat earth being, revealed to me, and it's incremental, but to the point now where I question everything. And this, I saw another little video and I was going to watch it, but I had to go do something. And so when I come back, somebody had been on the computer and closed me out. And when I opened it back up, it was gone. But it was crazy, man. But it was a painting. It was an old, supposedly ancient painting or whatever. But it was this king. He was on a horse, and he had a crown on, so he was some kind of royalty or whatever. And behind him, there was a bunch of people standing there in like red robes or whatever. I guess his entourage, his court or whatever. And then standing in front of him was all these, I guess peasants or whatever, the people. And they had on these hats that were like tiered, and they had a little antenna coming out of it with a ball on the end of it, and they looked gold, like they was made out of gold. And all the people there had them on, and going from those from the ball up to a big cloud up in the sky up there was a little line going up to that cloud, and all them people had little lines from going up to that cloud. I mean, and of course I talked about that with us, that we're connected to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is a cloud, a water, it's a type of state of matter that we're not really familiar with. The fifth state of matter, the aether, the vril, the prana, the Akashic record, whatever you want to call it. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. But we're connected to that. It would be like a big cloud, but what they were showing though is the regular sky up there, and then this just a cloud there. Well, was that some kind of prophetic painting about this coming system of connecting us to the cloud? And somebody had a dream or a vision about it, and they painted it, and not really recognizing what it meant. But think about this too. It could have been depicting a time in history when people were doing this. Because think about it, if our pineal gland is sort of the transceiver that transmits information from our processors up to our nefesh, our soul, that's up in the aether, where all our information is stored. but it's just a weak signal, just enough to where we can transmit back and forth and store our information and all that stuff. But think if we come up with some kind of a hat like that amplified that signal. And what they was really showing there in that picture is that these people were communicating to each other telepathically. That they were able to send their thoughts up there. Because if you think of the aether, as this repository, this repository of knowledge, of all knowledge. And and it's sending and receiving constantly. I mean, just, amounts of information that we cannot even scientists, computer scientists and all could not even begin to conceive of the vastness of information that's being constantly shuffled in and out of it. I mean, just beyond our ability to comprehend it. And that's why most people would seem, it's far-fetched because, but, again, you got to remember we're dealing with the, Yahweh Elohim, the creator of all things, and who is from everlasting to everlasting, eternal, infinite. So, to him, it's nothing. To us, it is unbelievable. And that's why a lot of people can't, even so-called believers can't believe that this is really happening, that this is really here. They think it's all right in here. All of our thoughts, all of our information is stored inside this little melon. Well, it's not. This is a processor that's just processing information, and then it's there's a little bit of information that's left here and stored here, our identity, and all that, but the rest of it's going up there and being stored. I mean, we couldn't, our little melon heads couldn't hold all that information. I mean, it's just too much. It's just too vast. I mean, you're talking about a lifetime of information. And I mean, it ain't just, written or oral or nothing. I mean, it is visual. It's sense of smell. It's taste. It's hearing. It's seeing. It's the sense of touch. It's all of that information. I mean, that is a vast, vast amount of information. I mean, from one instant to the next, I mean, we're generating a tremendous amount of data, information. And we could, like I said, I mean, our head would be as big as a 100-story building to hold all that. So it has to be going somewhere. And I'm saying it's there. And if we were able to figure it out and put a hat on of some kind to amplify that signal to where it would overcome the noise of all of the data being shuffled around and into that system, then I could think about a person and they would hear me thinking about them or whatever in their head, and they could, what do you want? Think about it, and what do you want? And then I need to meet you at, and they would hear it. If they had on a hat too, like what it was depicting in that picture. But we are convinced that the only way you can communicate with other people is through these cell phones, at a distance. And I've seen, these pictures and stuff of like these popes and these religious leaders with these long metal gold hats that were cone shaped. And they were shaped sort of like a pine cone kind of shape too, that fit on their head, and they were, it probably was amplifying their ability to go into the aether and get information or to communicate with their gods or whatever. And so, and so these Satan and his buddies and all, they're going to be, coming up with all of these different scenarios, but the main one's going to have to be this seventh one here: create heliocentric cosmology, evolution, and alien creators. So that when they show up here, and I believe they are. I believe all this stuff that we're seeing, the drone stuff and all that stuff. I don't really know what that is about, but I know people saying that there's a lot of that stuff they're seeing that ain't what they're being. People are being told that it's like these orbs or glowing like plasmas, that are orange and red, and they're just kind of moving around or whatever. I don't know. I know I've seen stuff, and it wasn't just me. It was other people saw it too, at the same time, So, we're being programmed, we're being conditioned for them showing up. And they're going to say they're our creators, the Anunnaki story or whatever. And that they're in a battle, this galactic battle with this other power, and that they're here on the earth, and that we need to all get together and go and fight against them because they want to destroy mankind and destroy them. And so, if you look again, I talked about it last week about the narrative of the United States, that we've been in a constant state of some kind of conflict from the beginning up until now. We're involved in Ukraine. We're involved in what's going on over in the Middle East. Even if we're not directly got soldiers there, which we most likely do, advisors, we're involved in it. And so we've been in something like this all along, and it's to justify the expenditures of money to develop the technology and the weapon systems. Take me a swallow of some juice here. Oh, simply cranberry. So, you do this, and you got these people at the top, the controllers or whatever, the cartel, the banking cartel, or whatever, that they keep these conflicts going, and they finance both sides of it to keep it going, so that there's this, the old saying is that necessity is the mother of invention. So, people are creating better and more powerful and more destructive weapons constantly, in these conflicts, because they're afraid that the other side's going to get something better and they're going to get taken over or whatever, So, but it's really just the same thing with NASA, the funneling, space exploration, all that stuff. It ain't for that. It's to develop technology, weapons technology and aerospace technology is what it's for. It ain't got nothing to do with going to space. That's just a cover. And at the tune of $72 million a day that we're giving to them of our money. And so it's to keep the narrative going. And I mean, look at all these programs that come through, Apollo, Chiron, Mars, Gemini, Thor, all of these ancient gods. So, and the objective of Satan in all of this, to create a worldwide war machine to go up against the Kodesh City and the saints. I mean, that's the ultimate agenda and the ultimate goal. And so I'm going to look at a few scriptures here, and, to answer the guy that he asked me about, last week, left a message wanting to know, what are we to do? If we are in the little season, what are we to do? Well, okay, first off, the first thing that we got to do is we got to know our enemy. We got to know our enemy, who he is, and what he, is up to. All right, Luke 21:31. Yahushua said to Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. And there's going to be certain people that he really wants, he wants to get a hold of more than others. He himself, for most of us, it's underlings that deal with us, or out to get us or trip us up or tempt us or try to do us harm, whatever, whatever their agenda is, and whatever the Most High allows, to test us, to test our belief. But for certain people, he don't just want to test you, he wants to sift you like wheat. So, then we can look here in John chapter 8, verse 44, where he was talking to the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the scribes and all. He says, ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. So that's indicator one. He's a liar and the father of it, and a murderer. So anything that has that associated with it in any way is of him. Okay. All right, we look here at 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 2:11. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not. Well, let me start up here at verse 10. To whom ye forgive anything, I forgive also. For if I forgive anything, to whom I forgave it, for your sakes forgave I it, in the person of Yahushua. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. And it's tied to forgiveness. So, we have to have a forgiving heart. Because unforgiveness is of Hasatan. That's one of his devices. To keep, for you to hold grudges, to hold hatred, to hold unforgiveness. And he says, if you don't forgive, I'm not going to forgive you if you don't forgive. How can you ask me to forgive you if you, whom you haven't seen, if you can't forgive the people that you have seen? So we got to remember that's, one of his devices is to, keep us from being forgiven. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour, whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. In other words, he's going around, he's looking for somebody to devour, and we have to resist it. We have to resist him, resist steadfast in the belief, in our belief in Yahushua and in Elohim. Keep our belief, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. In other words, others are experiencing the same thing. We're not the only ones that are going to experience these things. They, all the brethren are going to be, and sisters are going to be experiencing this affliction and testing and, tribulations. And then we'll look here at Revelation chapter 20, verse 3. I had read this last week. Wait a minute. This is something I want to read later. Wrong place there. All right. Now, it says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, until the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. All right. And it's funny, that Statue of Liberty up there on Liberty Island there in New York Harbor is a depiction of Satan. And that it's got a chain around a broken chain around its ankle. And then you look at the first flag of the United States, the Gadsden flag. It was a coiled up serpent, and it said, "Don't tread on me." And Yahushua said, "I give you power to tread on serpents and on scorpions." And the Roman Empire, if you go back to Daniel chapter 2 and look at the description of the statue and the legs of iron and the feet of iron mixed with miry clay, those two legs represented the two halves of the world, basically, that the Roman Empire controlled, the Eastern and the Western. Now, I believe that they control way more of the world than what we've been led to believe. They just controlled the Near East and North Africa and Europe, Mediterranean area. And I didn't even know this, and I'm usually kind of studious, as far as like searching stuff out and looking around, just, curiosity about these Roman buildings in Beijing, China. I mean, bunches of them. Where did they come from? Where did Roman buildings come from in Beijing, China? And they looked old. It wasn't like something that they just, built replicas. No. These things were old. I mean, you could tell they were ancient. I'm just saying, that the Roman Empire was way bigger than what we've been led to believe. That they ruled the world. They were given power, for 1 hour by the dragon to rule, the whole world. And these other powers gave them their authority. These 10 kings gave them their authority to rule with them. And so, but then, it says, and when in verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them. And Gog, I believe, is a principality. It's one of these spiritual principalities. Magog was a descendant of Japheth that went and settled over there in the east. I mean, that whole area over there. But back to the two legs, the iron legs, the feet of iron mixed with miry clay. Could that be America? A revised Rome? And were our founding fathers, so-called founding fathers, Romans, that came out of the millennial kingdom and wanted power and wealth and, to be a part of this revival? Just something to think about. But it says, and and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and passed the camp of the saints about and the beloved city, and fire came down from Elohim out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And the beast and the false prophet were cast in there back at the the end of the tribulation. They've been there, and they're there, and they're going to be there forever and ever, because they were controlled and taken over by spirits. So, and them spirits, them principalities or whatever, they're immortal beings. They they don't die. So that's the reason it says they will be tormented day and night. Well, if you're dead or destroyed, you can't be tormented. They will, and it doesn't say that about these people over here. It says now that the people that are judged, and the goats, it says, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. But it doesn't say they'll be tormented forever and ever. They're destroyed, and that's it. Eternal life, eternal death. No gray area, folks. All right, for the brother that sister, I don't know. A lot of times the names that people use, for their comments or whatever, it doesn't, and it doesn't matter whether they're male, female, whoever they were. They asked me, if that it appears to them that yes, we are, it seems more and more like we are in the little season. And he says, well, what are we to do? Well, I'm going to give you some suggestions here. What the Scripture says. Always read this. This right here. This is our guidebook. Yahweh Elohim says, I am Yahuwah. I change not. Yahushua says, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. I change not. So, read the Torah. Read the Gospels. And I've said this before, that the Torah lays out Elohim's code of conduct of how we are to operate and maintain ourselves in His kingdom to please Him. This is not just His law for us. This is His law for all of His creation. It applies to every living creature. Okay? It doesn't just apply to us. This is His universal law. It's how you keep peace. It's how you keep happiness. It's how you keep joy and tranquility and contentment. They're not to be a burden to us. They're not to be killjoy. They are to actually give us freedom. With guidelines, with guardrails, to keep us from being hurt, to keep us from being destroyed. Okay? And, He doesn't want us to be, not be happy, to not have joy, to not be content. But we cannot really truly be that way if we have a nature that wants to do harm to other people and prevent them from being able to be happy and from being able to have joy and contentment. There has to be guidelines and guardrails around us to prevent us from doing things that are going to be harmful to other people and to His creation. So, He gives us guidelines. But again, like I said, if you look at the millennial kingdom and these people go into it, even though there's no Hasatan or anything, they still have their human nature. And of course, ultimately, everybody that confesses Yahushua and follows him will be given, will be corrected. Our flawed reasoning and our flawed thinking will be corrected. And we'll be given eternal life. And then we can truly experience true happiness, true joy, true contentment, and be able to express ourselves with the nature that we were given, that Elohim gave to us, we'll be able to express that, artistically, creatively. We're not going to be sitting on clouds playing harps. No, his kingdom is a kingdom of work, of doing. And so we're going to be doing things. We're going to be expressing our creative ability, our artistic ability, our, thinking, learning new things and growing in knowledge and in wisdom. And so, that's what he wants for us. All right, now if we look here in John chapter 8 and verse 12, wait a minute now. All right, chapter 8. I read that, I believe. Chapter 8, verse 12. No, I had two different things marked at that location. Chapter 8, verse 12. Then spake Yahushua again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. Follow him. I mean, this has been my message ever since I started doing this. Regardless of where we are in time, folks, that really ultimately doesn't matter. What matters is that we follow him and we listen to him through the Ruach. The Ruach does what the Father and the Son tell him. He only speaks what he hears them say. He never speaks of himself. So Yahushua gave him to us to bring us to truth, his truth, Elohim's truth. And Yahushua is the bridge that reconnects us to the Father, where Adam had that broken. That connection was broken, and he was connected to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so Yahushua came to reconnect us back to the Father. But we can only be reconnected back to him if we're following Yahushua, if we're on that straight and narrow path. Because, the right-hand path of the world and the left-hand path of the world, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you're going to either think, I'm a moral person, I don't really do anything bad, I don't, that ain't going to get you saved. That's not going to get you converted. You have to confess him, follow him, and keep your focus on him. And when I talk about focusing on him, I'm talking about spiritually, folks. We're developing the spiritual us. We have to disconnect ourselves from this physical. This physical is we're at war. Our spiritual self is at war with this physical self. And we've got to separate the two. And overcome, our spiritual self has to overcome this flesh and blood self. Because it's that spiritual self that's reconnected to the Father, not this fleshly corrupt body. It's our spiritual self that gets reconnected through Yahushua. He's that bridge, that connect, where there was a chasm there, like a big chasm. And Yahushua is a bridge across that chasm that reconnects us back over to the Father. But we cannot do it in this physical flesh. It's spiritual. Elohim is not flesh and blood as we are flesh and blood, but is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. We must worship him through our spirit, not this physical flesh. And that's why we have to come, it says be in the world but not of the world, because if you love the world, you don't love him. And I'm going to show you, and this to me, is one of my favorite. Okay, and I'm going to read this here from John chapter 14, verse 15. If you love me, keep my commandments. That's simple. The commandments, the commandments of love. Love the Father with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. You fulfill all the law. That's how you do it. But you can only do it in the spirit, folks. You cannot do it in this flesh. It ain't going to happen. Then, and this is probably one of my most favorite chapters in Scripture, is the first epistle of John, the epistle of love. And I'm not going to read all of this, but it says, this is in chapter 2, starting at verse 1 of the first epistle of John. My little children, these things write I unto you, that ye sin not. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Yahushua HaMashiach, the righteous. And he is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. And hereby we do know that we know him if we keep his commandments. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of Elohim perfected. Hereby know we that we are in him. He that saith he abideth in him ought himself also to walk even as he walked. Talking about Hamashiach. He walked in the ways of Elohim. This is a common theme throughout Scripture, going all the way back to the beginning. And Noah walked in the ways of Elohim. And Abraham walked in the ways of Elohim. And Moses walked in the ways of Elohim. They all walked in his ways. Thy word is a light unto my feet and a lamp unto my path. Or a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. The light is truth. The light is truth. And it shines the way, the straight and narrow way, the path. It shines the light on it so that we can see how to walk in the ways of Elohim. And so it says, brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment, which you had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which you have heard from the beginning. Again, a new, and what is that? Obedience. Obedience to the Father. Yahushua was obedient in all things, even to death on the cross. It says, again, a new commandment I write unto you, which thing is true in him and in you, because the darkness is past, and the true light now shineth. He that saith he is in the light, and hateth his brother, is in darkness even until now. He that loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there is none occasion of stumbling in him. But he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he goeth, because that darkness has blinded his eyes. So And I would encourage you to read this whole epistle. Read all the scriptures, but this one in particular, this is the epistle of love. And it, when you go on further in here, it talks about how that it says, ye are of Elohim, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. They are of the world, therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of Elohim. He that knoweth Elohim heareth us. He that is not of Elohim heareth not us. He that is heareth not us. Hereby know we the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. This is how you know the difference, folks, between truth and error. He just told you right there. Those who hear the words, that this word right here, when we give it to somebody and they hear it, they're of Elohim when they receive it. But the ones who don't receive it, they are in error. They're in error. They have the spirit of error. But those who speak this word and believe it, they have the spirit of truth. That simple. It says, beloved, let us love one another, for love is of Elohim, and everyone that loveth is born of Elohim, and knoweth Elohim. He that loveth not, knoweth not Elohim, for Elohim is love. In this was manifested the love of Elohim toward us, because that Elohim sent his only begotten Yachid, or Son, into the world, that we might live through him. Through him. Herein is love. Not that we loved Elohim, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if Elohim so loved us, we ought also to love one another. No man has seen Elohim at any time. No man has ever seen Elohim. Ever. They've seen his image, but not the true Elohim. If we love one another, Elohim dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Hereby know we that we dwell in him, and he in us, because he hath given us of his Spirit. And we have seen and do testify that the Father sent the Son to be the Savior of the world. Whosoever shall confess that Yahushua is the Son of Elohim, Elohim dwelleth in him, and he in Elohim. And I've talked about this before, folks. Yahushua told us. He says, have I not told you from the beginning that the Father is in me? I am in the Father. I am in you, and you are in me. Whenever we are truly born again and we are in Yahushua, we are a part of Elohim, a part of God. In a lot of these religions, especially Christianity, man, they just don't get it. They do not get that. But you can only do that in the Spirit, folks. You cannot do it with this flesh. This is corrupt. That's why the change has to be in our spirit. And then we become part of Yahushua, and through Yahushua, part of Elohim. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out all fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. We love him because he loved us first. If a man say, I love Elohim, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother, whom he hath seen, how can he love Elohim, whom he hath not seen? And this commandment have we from him, that he also loveth Elohim, love his brother also. And that's what I just said a while ago about the law of love. That's the law of love, folks. And I hope that that helps you out, brother or sister, to understand that no matter where we're at in time, whether we're getting ready to go into tribulation or whether we're in a little season, it doesn't matter. His law, his judgments, his statutes, that's what matters. He's told us the way, and the way is the way of love. And perfect love casts out all fear, so it doesn't matter what happens. If we have perfect love, it casts out all our fear, and we won't have to fear any of this. And, people that have fear, he just said, that you are not perfected in your love. So you have to pray for it, and you have to, meditate on it. And I'm not talking about zoning your brain out. I'm talking about focusing on love. And love is action, folks. It's not just saying I love you. It's what you do. It's like it said, if you say you love Elohim and you see your brother over here going hungry and you don't do nothing to help him, really? Because James, he tells us about that too, about your belief. You show me your belief without works, and I show you my belief by my works. Not to gain favor with Elohim, but because it demonstrates your belief to others. Because you'd be surprised how many times I hear the word hypocrite about Christians. It's sickening. If they were doing what they were supposed to be doing through love, you wouldn't have all these homeless encampments all over the country and people going hungry. Instead of them depending on the government to do it, they would be doing it. Instead of heaping their treasures up. But they don't. And that's all part of it, folks. That's what I was talking about. If you were Satan and you were planning this stuff, create a banking, military, religion, you create all this stuff. And then you control the narrative. You create the doctrines, dispensationalism, Kabbalah, Talmud, Islam, you name it. And then you start, toward the end there, you start creating the coexist narrative. Join all of us together. And whether it's tribulation or whether it's, either one would be a tribulation, folks. Whether it's the tribulation of the desolation of Israel and the destruction of the temple, or whether it's, the little season, and the idea of turning us into a cyborg or something, that would be a tribulation scenario too. Tribulation it can be any time, whenever you're being persecuted or they're trying to destroy you for your belief or whatever. But how I just read it there in the epistle of John, first epistle there. If you say you love Elohim and you don't love your brother, you're a liar. And again, love is an action word, you know. I mean, you do, you know. And he said, you know, if you have the bounty of this world, you know, and you see your neighbor in need and you don't do any, you know, have compassion on them, then, you know, you're not in him. But, you know, I understand too, you know, he tells us that charity begins at home. We have to, you know, take care of our own first. And if we have anything left to help others, we do. But if, you know, more given, more expected. The more you're given, the more you're going to be expected to do. And so my words of encouragement to you is to, you know, try to obtain perfect love. I mean, I that's my goal. My desire is to have that perfect love. And you know, I'm like, you know, all people, I fall short. You know, I don't always do, but I try. You know, I keep trying and I keep, you know, praying and asking to have that perfect love and strengthen my belief and you know, and I pray that I might be counted worthy to escape these things. You know, and to be able to stand before the Son of Man. And that's really all we can do, folks. You know, but we've had an awakening. We've had our eyes opened up to, you know, greater truth, and the you know, to question everything that we've been told. And you know, from what I'm seeing more and more, I mean, it's all a lie. It's all deception. Every bit of it. Every bit of it. Religion, banking, economy, medicine, education. Every facet of life, all of it is all deception. And that's kind of what really led me to believe that we are in the little season. You know, even after I've, you know, kind of, you know, I didn't lambaste them or rail on them or nothing, but, you know, I just kind of said, you know, I'm not buying it, you know, but this is, you know, if you pray and you keep praying for understanding and wisdom and knowledge and discernment, he gives it to us liberally if our motives are right. You know, and our motive should be to keep from being deceived. Because, I mean, you know, you got to remember, Hasatan, ancient being, you know, super intelligent, you know, got great wisdom, and is the master of deception. You know, we're not, you know, he's in a whole nother league. You know, that's why, you know, there's only a couple that can, you know, deal with him. Michael and Yahushua and, you know, Elohim. You know, we can't. But we can, you know, from Scripture, we can know his mode of operation, you know, the things he does, you know. I mean, what, you know, his deceptions and his means that he uses to come after people. And what we have to do to fight against it. You know, Ephesians chapter 6. Put on the whole armor of Elohim that you might be able to stand in the evil day, having done all to stand. Stand. And with that, folks, I'm 2 hours into this video. It's long, but, you know, these kind of things are, you know, take time. You know, I could probably go on a lot longer, but I tried to kind of cram it all in there about what, you know, put yourself in Hasatan's place. What would you do if you were trying to deceive the whole world? What would you do? And with that, I'm going to call it a day. I love you, folks. I hope you all will be blessed. And I'll see you again on the next Shabbat if Yahweh is willing.